You lost as a result of misheard.
Nothing less than everything.
The courtroom was packed, the air electric with tension. Cameras flashed as Johnny Depp stepped inside, his face a mask of calm defiance. Across the aisle sat Amber Heard, eyes fixed forward, the weight of the world pressing on both of them. For weeks the headlines had been merciless: wife beater or wronged man. Hollywood's golden pirate on trial. What had started as a fairy tale romance had devolved into one of the most brutal, public, and humiliating celebrity legal battles of the century. The world watched as intimate details spilled out, recordings of screaming matches, photos of bruises, broken bottles, shattered lives. Fans chose sides, brands dropped him, Disney quietly erased him from Pirates of the Caribbean. Once the lovable rogue of Hollywood, Johnny became a symbol of everything messy about fame, love, and public downfall. But behind the courtroom drama was a longer, darker story. Decades of addiction, spirals of self-destruction, moments of brilliance wrapped in chaos. Johnny Depp wasn't just fighting for his reputation, he was fighting against the ghosts of his own past. Because the truth behind it all is darker. Johnny Depp was not born into fame. Long before the red carpets, the blockbuster movies, and the tabloid headlines, there was a boy from Owensboro, Kentucky, a small town with little promise and even less escape. Born in 1963, Johnny was the youngest of 4 children, growing up in a household marked by instability. His father, a civil engineer, was often absent, and his mother, Betty Sue, struggled with her own demons, leaving the family in a constant state of tension. By the time Johnny was 15, his parents had divorced. That fracture would become a defining moment. "You don't know what it's like to watch the foundation of your world crack," Johnny would later reflect. He dropped out of school at 16, chasing something he couldn't quite name. Freedom, escape, or maybe just noise loud enough to drown out the silence at home. He found it in music. With a guitar in hand, Johnny played in garage bands, drifting from town to town, bar to bar, chasing gigs and cheap motels. There was no plan, no clear dream, only the stubborn belief that there had to be something more. Fate arrived in the most unexpected way, through Nicolas Cage. When the struggling young musician met the rising actor, Cage saw something raw in Johnny, a restless energy, a charisma that couldn't be taught. "You should try acting," Cage told him. It sounded ridiculous, but Johnny tried, and soon, without formal training or polished ambition, he found himself auditioning for A Nightmare on Elm Street. The part was small, but the impact was immediate. Johnny Depp, with his sharp jawline, brooding gaze, and quiet magnetism, lit up the screen. Girls swooned, directors took notice. Hollywood had a new face to watch. But here's what you might not know. Johnny never wanted to be a movie star. He saw himself as a musician, a drifter, someone who didn't belong under the bright lights. Acting was an accident, fame was an accident, and that accidental rise would one day cost him more than he ever imagined. Hollywood has a way of making rebels into icons. For Johnny Depp, that transformation happened almost overnight. After his breakout in A Nightmare on Elm Street, he landed the role that would define his early career, Officer Tom Hansen on 21 Jump Street. Suddenly, Johnny was everywhere: magazine covers, teenage bedroom posters, TV interviews. He became the heartthrob of a generation, with fan mail pouring in by the thousands. But beneath the polished image, Johnny felt like an imposter. The fame felt loud, suffocating. Acting in a cop show wasn't art to him, it was a cage. He wanted out. And so, at the height of his teen idol status, Johnny did something few dared. He walked away. He turned down mainstream roles, choosing instead to work with offbeat directors in strange, beautiful films that didn't always succeed at the box office, but earned him critical respect. With Edward Scissorhands, Johnny found his true cinematic voice. Tim Burton, the director with a taste for the dark and the strange, became his creative soulmate. Together they made magic. Sleepy Hollow, Ed Wood, Corpse Bride. To the public, Johnny was no longer just a pretty face. He was an artist, a risk-taker, a shapeshifter who refused to be pinned down. But it was Pirates of the Caribbean that changed everything. As Captain Jack Sparrow, Johnny didn't just play a pirate, he became one, transforming a Disney adventure into a global sensation. His swaggering, slurring, coal-eyed Sparrow became iconic, earning him an Oscar nomination and cementing his place as one of the most bankable stars in the world. What you might not have seen, though, was the weight that came with that success, the pressures of carrying billion-dollar franchises, the endless press tours, the gossip, the rumors. For someone who had never craved the spotlight, the glare was now blinding. Johnny kept working, but the cracks were showing. There were whispers of erratic behavior on set, of nights that blurred into mornings, of a man trying to hold on to his art in a world that only saw dollar signs. To millions, he was a star. To Johnny, he was still the misfit kid with a guitar, wondering how the hell he ended up here. The higher you rise in Hollywood, the harder the world watches when you stumble. For Johnny Depp, the cracks in his carefully crafted world didn't appear overnight. They formed slowly in moments of exhaustion, heartbreak, and self-doubt, until they could no longer be hidden. Whispers turned into headlines. Stories emerged of chaotic film sets, delays, and conflicts. There were lawsuits, managers, bodyguards, even lawsuits from within his own team. His finances, once seemingly bottomless, were revealed to be teetering under the weight of lawsuits, lavish spending, and mismanagement. But nothing compared to what came next. In 2015, Johnny married actress Amber Heard. To the public, they were a glamorous couple, a whirlwind romance that looked perfect on red carpets. But behind the cameras, their relationship was unraveling. Accusations flew on both sides, of arguments that turned ugly, of nights blurred by anger and resentment. When Amber filed for divorce in 2016 and obtained a restraining order, the media storm exploded. Photos surfaced, recordings leaked, social media split into factions. Said justice for Amber, justice for Johnny. Fans turned into investigators, combing through court documents and videos, desperate to piece together the truth. And then the real fallout began. Johnny's reputation, once eccentric but beloved, became unpredictable, unstable. Studios hesitated. Disney quietly distanced itself. Brand deals dissolved. Once he had been untouchable. Now he was fighting to keep his career, his image, even his voice. What you didn't see on the magazine covers was the isolation, friends falling away, trusted colleagues leaving, a man grappling not only with public judgment but with private grief, the loss of his mother, the strain on his children, the sense that the world he had built was crumbling from the inside. It wasn't just one scandal. It was a storm of personal, professional, and emotional collapse, all playing out on the biggest stage imaginable, with the whole world watching and very few people truly understanding. By the time Johnny Depp walked into the courtroom in Fairfax, Virginia, in 2022, he wasn't just fighting a legal battle. He was fighting for the fragments of his life. The defamation trial against Amber Heard became a global spectacle, streamed live, dissected frame by frame, across social media, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok. This wasn't just celebrity gossip. It was raw, messy, public pain. Johnny sat on the stand and told the world about the spiral, the drinking, the anger, the heartbreak. He admitted to his flaws, his mistakes, but also stood his ground, denying the worst accusations. Amber, in turn, painted a portrait of fear, control, and emotional turmoil. What unfolded wasn't just about two people, it was about power, truth, trauma, and the unsettling realization that even now, no one watching really knew the full story. Outside the courtroom, fans camped out overnight just for a glimpse. Social media became a battleground. Memes, edits, reaction videos, some sympathetic, others cruel, turned human pain into viral content. Brands stayed silent. Hollywood watched carefully, calculating risks. And underneath it all was Johnny, a man in his late 50s, tired, haunted, but determined. He wasn't trying to be Jack Sparrow or Edward Scissorhands anymore. He was just Johnny, bruised, human, standing before the world without the costumes, without the scripts. When the verdict came down, largely in his favor, the internet erupted. Supporters cheered, critics questioned, and Johnny played guitar on a stage in England that very night, as if music was the only language left that made sense to him. But here's the thing no headline captured. This was not a victory lap. This was a man who had lost years, relationships, trust, a man who had to watch his life picked apart piece by piece, knowing that some wounds, no matter the verdict, would never fully heal. Today, Johnny Depp remains one of Hollywood's most polarizing figures. To some, he's a cautionary tale, a man whose talent was shadowed by chaos, whose personal life became inseparable from his art. To others, he's a survivor, an artist who refused to let the world define him, even as it tried to tear him apart. His face still draws crowds. His name still sparks debate. But beyond the headlines, beyond the courtroom, beyond Captain Jack Sparrow, there's a quieter truth. Johnny is a man still searching. Searching for peace, for purpose, for something that isn't scripted or sold or posted online. What do we remember him for? The unforgettable performances, the scandals, the comeback? Or maybe the way his story forces us to ask harder questions. How much do we really know about the people we admire? And how much are we willing to forgive? The truth is, Johnny Depp's legacy is still being written. And maybe so is his redemption.